No one expected the queen of powerful ballads to die in a hotel bathtub. No one imagined that the voice, once celebrated on the world's grandest stages, would be silenced by something far more insidious than time. She had it all: fame, beauty, talent that made the angels jealous. But behind the spotlight, Whitney Houston was drowning long before the water ever touched her skin. What turned America's golden girl into a fading ghost in her own story? What unseen demons whispered loud enough to silence one of the greatest voices in music history? In the end, it wasn't the notes she missed, it was the moments no one heard. This is not just about her downfall, it's about everything we refuse to see. Tonight, Whitney Houston returns not as a legend, but as a woman, broken and brilliant, standing in a light you've never seen her in before. From a gospel cradle to the lonely echoes of a superstar's soul, Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born on the 9th of August, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, a city scarred by racial tensions and economic hardship. But inside a modest two-story house on Dorrance Street, a voice was born that would one day change music forever. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was a gospel legend and a backup singer for Elvis Presley and Aretha Franklin. Her cousin, Dionne Warwick. And yet, in a home filled with harmony, Whitney often felt out of tune. Behind closed doors, discipline was rigid, expectations even higher. Cissy saw in her daughter a star, and she trained her like one from the age of 11. Whitney sang in church, but she didn't always feel heard. There are rumors, whispers in the family tree that paint a darker portrait. In later interviews, Whitney's brother Gary and longtime assistant Mary Jones revealed that as a child, Whitney may have been molested by a female family member. Though Whitney never spoke publicly about it, the pain lingered like a shadow cast over every stage she stood on. In school, she was shy, awkward. She was bullied for her skin color, for her white-sounding voice, for being different. One classmate remembered, "She had that glow, but she looked sad, like she was carrying something none of us could see." She found brief refuge in the church choir, her sanctuary. The echo of stained glass light, the wooden pews, the trembling of organs, that was where Whitney's voice first soared. But even there, she was haunted, not by demons, but by dreams too big for the place she came from. Her father, John Houston, was a charismatic figure, but emotionally distant. As a Newark City administrator, he was always chasing deals, shaking hands, making promises. At home, he was rarely present, except when it came time to control Whitney's money, years later, when their bond would be shattered by betrayal. It's no coincidence that her most heartbreaking ballads weren't just songs, they were confessions. "Didn't we almost have it all?" wasn't just a lyric, it was a cry from the little girl still sitting alone in her childhood bedroom, wondering if love could ever really stay. She was a prodigy, but she was also a girl who learned too early that being gifted means being watched, and being watched means being judged. In a world that prized perfection, Whitney Houston learned to wear masks. And no one asked what she was hiding beneath them. When a dream comes true but costs more than you bargained for, Whitney was only a teenager when the music industry began to whisper her name. By 17, she was modeling for 17 magazine, one of the first black women to do so. Her beauty turned heads, but it was her voice that stopped time. At 19, she was discovered singing in a Manhattan nightclub. Clive Davis, then president of Arista Records, was in the audience. And from the moment she sang, he knew. She wasn't just another singer. She was a phenomenon. He signed her, he polished her, he branded her. But here's the bitter truth. From day one, Whitney Houston wasn't allowed to just be Whitney Houston. Her image was curated to perfection. Her music leaned pop, not soul. Ballads, not gospel. Executives warned her to stay away from sounding too black. Even her album covers were deliberately color-graded to appeal to white audiences. She became a crossover queen, but in the process, lost the freedom to choose her own sound. The industry loved her voice, but not her roots. In 1985, her debut album dropped like a comet. Whitney Houston sold over 25 million copies. Hits like Greatest Love of All and Saving All My Love for You lit up the charts. She earned her first Grammy. She was just 22. But the whispers began. She's not really R&B. She's too polished. She's a sellout. At the 1,989 Soul Train Awards, she was booed by parts of the audience, black audience members who felt she had turned her back on them. Whitney was stunned. Her success had made her a star, but it had also made her a stranger. In trying to please everyone, she had belonged to no one. She once admitted in an interview, "Sometimes I wonder if people would love me if I sang differently, if I looked different, if I was realer." Fame didn't come with a manual. It came with pressure, perfection, and the fear of falling. And Whitney was already slipping behind the scenes. By her mid-20s, rumors of drug use circled like vultures. She denied them, of course. She smiled, gave polished interviews, posed for magazines, but close friends saw the cracks. She had climbed so fast, so young, but the higher she went, the lonelier it became. And somewhere deep inside, that little girl from Newark, the one who just wanted to sing in church, was still asking the world, "Will you still love me tomorrow?" She ruled the world, but couldn't rule herself. By the early 1992, Whitney Houston wasn't just a star. She was a global force. Her second album, Whitney, 1987, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, the first woman in history to ever achieve that. Hit after hit, I Wanna Dance with Somebody, Didn't We Almost Have It All, so emotional. Whitney had become a chart-topping machine. But the world didn't know her name until 1992, when she made a leap not just into music history, but cinematic immortality. That year, she starred opposite Kevin Costner in The Bodyguard, her first major film. The film was a smash, but the soundtrack, it was culture-defining. Her rendition of I Will Always Love You didn't just top the charts, it obliterated them. 14 consecutive weeks at number over 40. 5 million copies sold worldwide. It became the best-selling soundtrack of all time. People called her the Voice. Not a voice, the voice. She performed for presidents, for royalty, for sold-out arenas in over 50 countries. By 1994, she was reportedly earning $30 million a year. She had it all: money, awards, legacy. And yet, behind every standing ovation, there was a silence that grew louder. Whitney became increasingly guarded. The schedule was brutal, non-stop tours, press, obligations. Her life was scheduled to the minute, her decisions filtered through managers, agents, and image consultants. In private, she began to rebel quietly at first, then destructively. She married singer Bobby Brown in 1992. To outsiders, it was a mismatch. She was elegance. He was bad boy R&B. But to Whitney, it was freedom. Bobby didn't see her as the Voice. He saw her as Nippy, her childhood nickname. But the marriage was chaotic. Drugs, jealousy, public fights, and toxic codependency became headlines. Whitney, who had once been America's princess, was now a tabloid regular. Still, she kept delivering. Even in chaos, she gave the world The Preacher's Wife soundtrack in 1996, making it the best-selling gospel album of all time. She was still showing up, still singing, still smiling. But her eyes had changed. Clive Davis once said, "She could sing like no one else, but there were days when she looked like she didn't even know who she was anymore." In chasing the perfection the world demanded, Whitney had lost the one thing she needed most: peace. Yes, she had the fame, the glory, the Grammys. But as the lights got brighter, Whitney's world got darker. The world watched her shine. Then, it watched her disappear. By the dawn of the 2000s, Whitney Houston's voice was no longer the centerpiece. It was the whispers about crack, missed concerts, slurred interviews, trembling hands that dominated the headlines. In 2002, she sat down with Diane Sawyer for what became an infamous interview. Her frame was gaunt, her energy erratic. Her voice, once angelic, was hoarse with exhaustion. When asked about drug use, Whitney laughed and said, "First of all, let's get one thing straight. Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Crack is whack." But behind the bravado was a woman unraveling. Friends and family tried to intervene. She would vanish for days, cancel tours, arrive late to award shows. At one concert in 2001, her voice cracked so badly she had to stop mid-performance. Her fans wept. so did she. Whitney and Bobby Brown's relationship had gone from passionate to poisonous. Physical fights, police calls, reality television that exposed their dysfunction to the world. It was all too real, too raw. The cameras rolled, America watched, and Whitney lost herself. She entered rehab multiple times: 2004, 2005, 2006. Each time, she seemed hopeful. Each time, she slipped again. But perhaps the most crushing blow came not from the press or the drugs, but from her own blood. In 2004, Whitney sued her father's company after discovering he had mismanaged her finances and attempted to exploit her contracts. Her own father, who had once managed her career, was now suing her for $100 million. He died later that year. They never reconciled. By then, Whitney's once invincible image had collapsed into tabloid fodder. Photos of her bathroom revealed drug paraphernalia. Her face, once radiant, appeared hollow and lost. The voice that had moved nations was barely a whisper. And yet, in her lowest moments, Whitney never fully disappeared. In 2009, she released I Look to You, a comeback album. She wasn't just the voice. She was the warning and the light. In her final years, Whitney Houston was a woman at war with her past, her image, her inner void. But underneath it all, there remained a flicker of the girl from Newark who had once just wanted to sing in church. She tried. God, she tried. After separating from Bobby Brown in 2006 and finalizing the divorce in 2007, Whitney entered a new era, sober, focused, and fiercely protective of her daughter, Bobby Christina. Their bond was intense, two wounded souls wrapped in each other's arms, both trying to stay afloat in the tidal wave of fame and legacy. Whitney often said, "She's my greatest love, my reason to keep fighting." In interviews post-2009, Whitney appeared gentler, more grounded. She spoke of faith, of forgiveness, of starting over. She sang gospel again, not for cameras, not for fame, but for herself. She appeared on Oprah, bearing her soul with a clarity the world hadn't seen in decades. "I lost myself," she admitted, "but God never lost me." Behind closed doors, she was working on Sparkle, a remake of a 1976 film about a girl group rising to fame and dealing with the fallout. Whitney wasn't the star, she played the mother, a woman warning her daughters of the dangers of the very world that had once swallowed her whole. It was her final role, art imitating life in the most haunting way. Though she never got the full redemption arc the public loves to see, Whitney did find moments of grace. She rekindled her friendship with Clive Davis. She attended church more often. She reconnected with her family. She smiled more, if only briefly. But the most poignant part of her story is what she left behind. Her voice, her songs, her courage. Young artists today, Ariana Grande, Beyoncé, Jennifer Hudson, cite Whitney as their blueprint. She didn't just break barriers, she became the bar. No female pop vocalist is untouched by her influence. In 2020, she was posthumously "You Can Lose Everything and Still Leave Behind a Miracle." They found her in a bathtub. But long before the water claimed her, silence had already begun to wrap itself around her soul. We often remember the high notes, those soaring, effortless belts that defied gravity. But maybe what truly defined Whitney Houston wasn't what she sang. It was what she endured between the songs. It was what she endured. She was America's sweetheart. She was the fallen diva. She was the cautionary tale. She was all of them at once. And maybe that's why her story lingers. Because for all the Grammys, the broken mirrors, the shattered relationships, the stadiums, the hotel rooms, what remains is this: a girl who just wanted to be loved without having to be perfect. A woman who gave us everything until she had nothing left to give. A voice that was both a weapon and a prayer. So, the next time I Will Always Love You plays in the background of your life, don't just sing along. Pause. Listen. And remember, behind that perfect note was a wounded heart, still beating for us all. Whitney Houston didn't survive her story. But maybe we can survive ours because of her. If this journey touched you, if her truth meant something, leave a message below for Whitney, for someone you've lost, or for the part of yourself that still believes.